I recognize the member for Cypress Hills.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a rather unusual day, I think. In the history of this particular facility, I believe it's quite unique to have this many people deciding not to run of their own free will, not the will of the people. And I was just looking at the list of names and the years that they have served in this House, and you know, there's about 150 years of corporate knowledge that is going to be leaving through these doors today when this is all over. And that's a pretty important segment of our history as a party and certainly as a government. And I'm proud to be able to say that I played a part and I shared in that history. Not only am I proud, but I know that some of my family members are pretty proud. I have an elderly uncle in Calgary who says, if your dad had been alive today, he'd have been so proud he'd be popping the buttons off his vest. He's said that half a dozen times over the past 16 years or so. And I believe that's true, frankly. My dad was a small-town minister and didn't have a real good education. But he sure was willing to live his life sort of through us, as his sons did various things, achieved new heights, had new opportunities. He lived through us. And he came from a very poor agricultural family and never did have much, but he lived to enjoy some of the decisions and some of the challenges and careers that we were able to, my brother and I were able to take in our lives. You know, I've known this day's arrival was waiting for me. I've known it was coming for 6 months. I've thought about what I would say today, and I thought maybe I would say something profound. I don't think that's going to happen, because I really don't think anybody who follows politics or who's been in this building is looking for the profound. I think what the people of my constituency respected most was plain talk and honesty. That's profound. And being there when they needed you, being at their kitchen table to talk about their problems and their aspirations and their dreams for the province. You know, I sometimes think that we don't provide really good leadership. We're a little bit behind where our constituents are. We sort of reflect what they want to be and what they have for aspirations in terms of the future of this great province. And so I lived that style of service, I think, and it served me well because the people kept coming to the polls and voting for me over the last 16 and a half years. So if I'm going to offer any advice to anybody today, I'd say politics is a worthy endeavor. I might not have thought that when I first came here. I might have come for the wrong reasons. I did want to serve, but I might have had the wrong motivation. Now that I've been here long enough to have weighed the value of this role, I think it's about service to people. Nothing higher, nothing more, nothing less. And if you're here for some other reason, you might make it to that ultimate plateau or that goal that you've established for yourself. Some heightened level of responsibility or public recognition. But the point is, if you aren't serving the people who sent you here, you're not doing what the job was intended to be. I asked the House Leader how long I had to speak. He said about 20 minutes. I said, heck, I'm just getting warmed up in 20 minutes. My voice won't last a lot longer than that, so I'll probably be a little more brief than usual. Nobody does this job by themselves, however. I have heard that comment from our previous speakers, and it's true. You know, I got into politics because my wife said to me one day, I'm so tired of listening to you complain. If you don't get off the couch and do something about that, I'm never going to listen again. So my wife, in a way, was the great motivator. Well, so were the circumstances of the day, Mr. Speaker. I tried to address them in earlier comments. You know, when railroads were being abandoned and elevators were coming down and schools were being closed in half a dozen of the communities that I now represent, when you saw people packing up and leaving the province, and the 3 lanes west and the 1 lane east that I talked about previously, we lived that in southwest Saskatchewan. And I remember after coming here, I was newly elected, and in my first speech, I outlined all those complaints, all those things I'd heard at those kitchen tables I'd visited. I outlined them in that speech, and I said, we are here to serve notice on the government of the day. We want our due. We will not be ignored any longer. I'm paraphrasing that because I don't remember exactly how the speech went, but that was the substance of the speech. And you know, I'm happy to report that even in opposition, I was able to make a difference for my constituents. Because of that 3-lane east idea, we got that highway, number 1 highway, twinned at an accelerated rate, much shorter time frame, because of a very serious accident that took a lot of lives. And we got that project done. I'm very proud of that because I was in opposition at the time, and I worked with the government to achieve that. I thought that was the best thing I could do for my constituents. Not make a political issue out of it, but work for a solution. And it has paid big dividends. The lanes going west are only 2. The lanes coming east are 2. But the lanes coming east are a lot busier these days than they were then. Mr. Speaker, I do want to talk about the supportive family and the support of staff, because that's equally crucial to our success as elected people. My wife would have been here today, I think, but she's driving west, going back to a job that she's held for 30 years, has shift work that's needed to be done, and she does it. So she's being responsible. She's going to be there for a 3 o'clock shift this afternoon. And she has done that repeatedly in our entire political life and previous to the political life. She's put that job not first, but very high on her priority list, because rural health care is a challenge in terms of finding people who will work. And if you have a job there and somebody won't come in or can't come in, the next person on the line gets called and they're expected to come in. And so a lot of times she's heading west to go to work, and I'm coming east to represent the people of Cypress Hills. We stopped many times in Swift Current to meet and have coffee, and she'd be out there for a week and I'd be in here for a week. On the weekend, it'd be the other way around. I'd be going west and she'd be coming in. It's an arrangement that we lived with, but it was part of our lives. But my wife paid a big price for me to be able to do this, and so did my kids. I just want that on the record, not so anybody will provide me an element of pity. I don't ask for that. I don't expect that. I knew what I was getting into. But there is a cost to this job. There is a price to be paid. And I'm not the only one who's paid this price. Some of my very dear colleagues here today have paid a bigger price than I. And I want to acknowledge them. And I want to acknowledge their families and the contributions they have made to the success that each of us have enjoyed. In my office, there are constituency assistants that we all have, but I want to acknowledge a whole group of CAs, actually. I've had a number over the years. I started out newly elected with Sherry Webster holding down my chief CA's position. I knew nothing about office organization from a political perspective. She'd had experience working with political people. I think Bob Pickering was one of the people that she worked for early on. After my election, she came in and organized the place and ran it. Beth Lunsden came in and worked there for a few years. Natasha Doré, who is senior admin here within the government now. I think she's executive assistant to the Deputy Minister of Advanced Education. Lucy Shorey, she joined the RCMP and turned out to be one of their spokesmen, public spokesmen in Ottawa. I mean, we had quality people in my office. Beth Humphrey, who's there now, she's put up with me for 14 years, and I don't know what I would do without her in the office. Glenna Gordon served me for probably 7 or 8 years and just recently retired. Carol Miller, who I introduced here in the House the other day, has been with me for 8 years. And Linda Wigg is there 1 day a week, maybe 1 day every 2 weeks as needed. These are people who have contributed to my success in ways I'll never be able to adequately address. Now, I never had to worry about my expense accounts not balancing. They balanced to the penny. I never had to worry about nobody working, that they wouldn't be able to staff the office. I said to the senior CA, this is your responsibility. You've got a budget, you've got an obligation. You find out who can work and who can't, and I want the office covered. They did that amongst themselves. When you called my office and they answered, you knew you were going to get attended to because they paid attention to people when they called. They made copious notes. They made every effort to solve the problem before the boss got back. And if they couldn't, here was the promise we made to the people of Cypress Hills. If we had a problem brought to us, we would get an answer back to them in 24 hours. If we couldn't, we'd phone the constituent back and say, here's what we've done, but we haven't found a solution yet. Here's what we're going to do, and here's when we're going to try and come back to you with an answer. We dealt with our constituents like a good business would deal with its clients. Provide service that they could count on. And I'll tell you, I couldn't have done that by myself. Those constituency assistants took that obligation as though it was sort of the reason they were working and the mantra of the place, and they abided by that standard of performance. And I was well served by that. And I can't tell my constituency assistants enough how much I appreciate their commitment and loyalty and determination to serve me and the constituents throughout Cypress Hills. It was a pleasure to work with them. I don't think I ever had an argument or a fight with any constituency assistant. They offered me the greatest respect, and I in turn respected what they brought to my office and my service to the people. You know, I was pretty naive when I got involved with politics. I was riding a tractor actually one day doing some summer polo when I heard about the formation of the Saskatchewan Party. And I thought, man, that's an idea whose time has come. I think I could support a party like that. Then the more I thought about it, the more I got to believe that maybe I could play a role in that party. But when the first convention was held, I was scared to go. I didn't want to be known publicly as a political person, and I had no idea what this new party was going to start out with and so forth. So I skipped the first convention. But by the time the second one rolled around, I actually attended. And I listened to the speeches by the 3 people who were running for the leadership of the party at the time, and I was convinced that there was some real quality potential in this party, and that its opportunities were pretty real, and there was maybe a future here. So I said to Elwyn Hermanson, who happened to win the leadership, I think I might consider running for you. And Elwyn wasn't exactly overjoyed. I don't know. He might have heard something about me. But he was kind of cautious, I'd say. He said, have you really thought about this? Do you know what this is all about? And I said, you know, I've followed politics for a long time, but no, I don't know what it's all about. But if I'm ever going to do it, it has to be now. I don't want to, ignore this opportunity and 10 years from now say, I wish I had done that. So I decided at that point I would do it and take whatever risks were associated with that decision. I was selling machinery in Shaunavon at the time, and of course that was pretty handy because my boss paid for my truck and and gas, and while I was out making sales calls, I'd say, oh, by the way, have you heard about this new political party? And, I was amazed at how many people thought that was a good idea, the creation of the Saskatchewan Party. And so I signed up a lot of new members that way. And when the day was done, kind of the sales day was done, I'd use the evenings, if I was way out west by Govenlock and Console and way out there where you can watch your dog run away for 3 days, that's where that happens. And I would go in the evenings, ranch to ranch, and sell memberships. And we had a contested nomination that year, but by the time it happened, when my opponent showed up with 40 people that he thought he could win the nomination with, I had 340 people in the hall. And I took that first nomination in a handy, clear-cut, simple majority, overwhelming. And that was the start of my political career. I've never looked back. I've never regretted it. It's been a great opportunity. I've met people that I would never have met before. I've traveled to places I had never expected I would be. I can't tell you how good it's been for me from an intellectual perspective. I love what I do. I love people. But I think I love contributing to the success of this province more than anything else. My colleague from Estevan talked about vision. If you look at the stats that have developed in this province from a business perspective, an export perspective, over the last 7 or 8 years, comparatively to the previous years, it isn't about what this government has done alone. Yes, we have modified rules and regulations. We made it simpler for people to prosper. It's about vision. It's about unfettering people's abilities and desires to succeed. And I think we have brought a change of mind and a change of heart to this population that we haven't seen in probably 100 years, maybe never. But the early pioneers that came here had the same kind of optimism in a lot of ways, and the people are seeing the potential and opportunity in our province right now like they've never seen it before. And that is the foundation of the Saskatchewan Party government's success. It's not what we have done, it's what they have done. We've just been sort of the mechanism by which that could be accomplished. Have we had highlights in my tenure in Cypress Hills? I am not watching the clock. I hope somebody else is. Yes, we've had lots of highlights. I said earlier that when I came to this place, we felt like we were the forgotten Southwest. That was the standard phrase anywhere west of Swift Current, right, Premier? And I determined that that wouldn't happen again. And so one of my objectives was to provide service and infrastructure to the Southwest region that I represented. And we were pretty successful at that. We rebuilt Highway 32. That was one of our very first promises out of the gate. It took us 3 years to be able to do the whole project, and it still needs some upgrading now, I'm just saying. But I think the minister said just get in line. We rebuilt Highway 37 from the Frenchman River Valley down to Climax. Beautiful highway. Most of Highway 37 is in really pretty good shape right now. Highway 13 from East End to Shawnman was done. There have been a number of other projects that have been done. But a couple of brand new schools in my constituency, a couple of, one very important hospital or integrated health center in Maple Creek that is a fabulous facility. Leader, the community of Leader has benefited significantly from our government. And I find that really interesting because the NDP had senior people in their government who called Leader home, and they could get nothing out of them. Nothing. Judy Samuelson sat in the Premier's office. She couldn't convince them to spend a nickel in Leader. We are putting a new health facility there in the next few years. We've rebuilt the highway from Leader up to the bridge going over the South Saskatchewan north. We've rebuilt a big section of Highway 32 coming into Leader from the east. The Those are the kinds of projects that governments need to deliver, and we've delivered. I saw a list the other day. I didn't bring it with me, but I think the total money invested by our government in the Cypress Hills constituency alone has exceeded $136 million since we formed government. $136 million. Nobody can say that we're the forgotten Southwest anymore. But you know, Mr. Speaker, when you come to a job like this, you might set out a number of goals and plans, and you know, when you accomplish most of what you set out to accomplish, I think it's time to move on. I would say that for the most part, I'm satisfied with what I was able to accomplish. There aren't too many things left that need to be done. I mean, there's always more things that can be done, but things that were important to me and things that were immediately important to my constituents have by and large been provided. And I think it's time for somebody else to carry that obligation on behalf of the people of Cypress Hills. I'm afraid to do this because one of my friends on the opposition side is going to pipe up soon and say, that's the first time I ever saw a windmill run on water. I do need to wind up. I want to tell my colleagues today, particularly on our side of the House, although I don't socialize a lot with my friends on the NDP side, I have a lot of respect for some of them. But I want to say, generally speaking, that in a political environment, this has been a really good group of people to work with. You know, the member from Saltcote said he can't ever remember hearing our caucus experience a raised voice. That is remarkable, given the tensions and the egos and all the ambition that sits around a table with 48 different people. That is amazing. And I think it's indicative of the desire of us all to serve the province first and not our own interests. And I want to compliment my colleagues. It's been a pleasure serving with them and enjoying their company and getting together inside and outside of session for some social gatherings, but for some business meetings and things. I always felt that I was well served by my colleagues, and I appreciate their support and the job that they do. Mr. Premier, I want to thank you. You've been a good friend for a long time. I remember sitting in the office side by side downstairs in room 135, and the things we talked about and the possibilities of implementing those things if we ever became government. A lot of that's been realized. And I appreciated your confidence in those early years of our government. I enjoyed being highways minister more than anything I think I could have imagined, because that was something I really felt was important. Decent infrastructure supports economic opportunity like nothing else. With apologies to my colleague who thought advanced education was more important. We had that conversation several times. But you've provided us with sound and appropriate leadership, visionary leadership, and I want to thank you for that. I really do. And to all of my friends in the building, whether we're talking about security, Pat Shaw has been a great friend, and his team, to the cafeteria where I spend way too much time, but and everybody in between, financial services, the library, wherever people work. Hansard, I had a fellow from Hansard stop me on the street as I was walking here. He didn't even tell me his name, but he said, I always like listening to you when you're talking because you enunciate well. Well, when I have a voice, I enunciate well. But I don't think he's on the job today. Nevertheless, whoever you are in this big and great building, this wonderfully historic building, I want to say thank you for the job you do. To those folks down there, the clerks, staff, whoever you are, thank you for doing a great job. I appreciated every one of you and the work you did, and we are justifiably proud of the quality of people that serve Saskatchewan through their role here in this. There's probably many other things I should say and cover, but this is my final speech and my final sentence. Mr. Speaker, you're a great friend. I love you dearly.